The most effective tool is you. You are the prevention tool. When I heard that for the first time, it stopped me in my tracks, because in my search for the best ways to protect my kids, I realized that it wasn't an app, there wasn't some secret formula, it's me. So let me encourage you here. You and I are the most influential people in our children's lives.
Well, you know, our story is different, right? Every story is different, so I don't want anyone to think that they're supposed to be like us. It really is different. And every child's different, and you know, when Lisa came into our life, she was our first child, so it was really different. And the first girl in 3 generations, so that was huge. But she was such a bundle of joy, and someone who just loved people, and people loved her. But even that just beautiful innocence was really attacked when she was 4. It turns out that a relative who was babysitting, he exposed himself. What else he did is, well, we don't know. And you know, I confronted him, made sure he got into therapy. We never told law enforcement, which I find that's pretty typical.
More importantly, what my parents did not know was that I was not okay. And they also didn't know how the abuse had impacted me. I wasn't able to communicate that because I was 4 years old. A new belief from the abuse was implanted in my brain, and the new belief was being reflected in the way that I behaved. Abuse is at epidemic levels today, and it's our kids' brains that need to be protected from the abuse, from the lies, from the manipulation, whether it be on social media or just in relationships in everyday life that we have with our kids. So we're going to focus on the brain right now and learn how the brain works. Good, supportive, healthy relationships are key to a healthy brain. You might have been like I was and not really know how the brain works and how all of this applies to everything that we're going to be talking about today. Dr. Daniel Amen, a renowned brain specialist, says, "Your brain is involved in everything you do, including how you think, how you feel, how you act, and how you get along with other people. Your brain determines your personality, character, intelligence, and every single decision that you make." It might kind of seem like a big duh statement to you, but when I learned all of this, it totally changed the way that I parented my kids. Because what I realized was that, like my parents, I was missing my kids' heart because I didn't know how their brain was working. So I'm going to teach you what I've learned about the brain and how it connects to the relationships that you have with your kids. Since the brain and heart go hand in hand, let's start with the brain and how it works. We're going to begin with the amygdala. The amygdala is the most primitive part of your brain, and it controls the emotions that we have.
When we talk about the issue of trauma, we have to address one region of the brain that's really important, and that region is called the amygdala. The amygdala is the fear center of the brain, and what that means is, if you think about in a normal house, there's typically a fire alarm system attached to the ceiling of the house. And if that fire alarm is healthy, when there is threat or when there is fire or it detects smoke, it will go off, sending a loud signal to the rest of the household that it's time to run away or to get out. In the amygdala, that fire alarm is broken or constantly activated. I will be scanning my environment and my body will be sensing things as threatening, even though they might not be.
The danger and the trauma from the sexual abuse broke my fire alarm system. I was constantly activated. I was constantly in a state of survival. Everything was threatening to me. The signals to survive were redirect from my logical brain to my emotional brain.
And looking back, you know, I realized, probably like most parents who love their kids, we had this idealized view of Lisa, and we only saw what we wanted to see. And it just seemed like Lisa was okay. You know, we didn't see behavioral changes or anything. We didn't realize for a long time that 7 years ago, they didn't know how to deal with trauma, didn't really think about it as therapy, counseling, and especially that kind of trauma, and especially what happens when you're really little, like 4 or 5. So none of that was addressed.
I was really, really insecure with myself physically. I made up stories just to get attention. Because obviously who I was wasn't enough, so I needed to make up stories. And those stories caught the attention of people. And so I learned that, well, you tell people what they want to hear and you might have a friend. You might have somebody accepting you. When you've got a kid who looks really good on the outside, it's really hard as a parent to recognize that something is going on the inside. And so yeah, they missed it, for lack of a better word, but it's kind of like I did a really good job of performing. So the performing kicked in, at a young age, because that's where I got the approval. So performing well equals approval, not performing well equals disappointment, so perform well. Okay, so what did you hear my parents say? They thought I was okay. They hadn't seen any behavioral changes, and they actually had a need for me to be okay. But what did you hear me say? I wasn't okay. I was extremely insecure about myself, and I began to perform to get approval.
Children are naturally very self-absorbed. That is a very natural developmental process, and it's beneficial in that when we love a child, like a sponge, they soak it in completely into who they are as a person. The negative aspect of that is when they experience abuse or trauma, it literally goes into the deepest parts of their psyche, their heart, and who they are as a person. Now, what's difficult about this is as children, they don't naturally have this part of their brain fully developed, and therefore they're operating in these lower regions of the brain. When there is a lot of trauma, those lower regions of the brain get a lot of activity, and the higher regions of the brain that deal with logical decision-making begin to shut down.
I immediately transferred toxic shame to who I was as a person. What my parents didn't know was that I believed that I was bad. And so how do you survive when you believe you're bad? I had to be the best kid anybody ever saw. So my form of survival was to perform, perform, perform. I do know that at about 4th grade was when I really started to realize that I needed to be better than everybody. And not in that way of like, I needed to be better than a person because I didn't like them. I needed to be the best at everything that I did so that I would never disappoint anybody. It worked through elementary school because it's, a small enough group of kids. And I was the best athlete. I was the best student. I played the piano. I was the student body president. It was just, it looked okay. And then when I hit junior high and all of a sudden this pool of fish multiplied by hundreds upon hundreds, I was like, I recognized quickly that there was no way that I could maintain that level of perfection, that level of performance. How real is the fear that a child has of disappointing their parents? A 20-year study of teens called The Real Truth About Teens and Sex revealed that 53% of 12 to 17-year-olds are very or extremely concerned about disappointing their parents. 36% report they are concerned. One teen who was interviewed said, "We lie to you because we don't want to disappoint you or be yelled at." We can't make people tell us the truth, and we don't know what we don't know, so we can't be mad at ourselves if we didn't know that our kids were lying to us. But what we need to know is how to respond well. What we can do is be a constant source of support for our kids by starting with just giving them some of those basic needs. First, our kids just need to be loved unconditionally. They need to know that there's nothing that they can do to earn your love because they are loved. And children need to be protected. They can't protect themselves, so we need to set up that line of defense for them. It's not to control them. If you think about it like a football game, your kid's the quarterback that everybody's trying to take out. So you set up a good line of defense around them. If we don't set up a good line of defense, our kids are going to get taken out. And last, children need to be free from the shame that toxic lies tell them. If they're not free from those lies, they're going to get stuck in the shame cycle where they're going to feel powerless. They're not going to like themselves, and they're going to start isolating. And then they're going to isolate from you. And this is where the great divide comes in. I wasn't joking when I said the brain and the heart go hand in hand. And sometimes we think that we're trying to protect our kids' hearts when in reality we really do need to be protecting their brains and their limbic system because that's where their emotions come from. In session 3, you're going to learn how to prevent a meltdown, an anxiety attack, and even reduce stress when you begin to understand trauma and how trauma impacts the brain.